Chapter 15. You don't need to change your thinking. If you've read this far, you may find yourself thinking that my main message is just think positive, or you need to change your thinking. But what I'm really pointing to throughout this book is that thoughts occur to us all day, every day. There is no stopping them. And these thoughts are experienced by us as our feelings or our feeling state. Most of us simply do not realize this process is what occurs and instead attribute our feelings to something other than our own thinking, such as our jobs, our relationships, and so on. It is this misunderstanding which is the cause of so many problems, issues, and inefficiencies. So once you realize that your feelings are a reflection of your thinking in the moment, you may naturally think, okay, so then I will change my thoughts. This is another misunderstanding. We'll continue to explore these ideas throughout the book, but I want to make it clear at this point that there is nothing wrong with your thinking or the thoughts that you have, and you don't need to change them. In fact, thinking that you do have to stop or change your thinking is a misunderstanding that can keep you trapped in an endless cycle of repetitive thoughts. If, for example, you believe there is something wrong with your thinking that leads you to eat sugary foods, you might try to stop thinking about sugary foods. In doing this, you're in fact making it more likely that you'll have sugary foods on your mind. Trying to stop thinking about something doesn't seem to be a successful strategy. It's a little like when someone tells you not to think about a pink hippopotamus, and then that's all you can think of. To try and stop thinking about something just involves more thinking, and is what often gets us confused and feeling stuck. Our thinking is not a fixed entity, and therefore it makes no sense to try to change it. When we do, we often hold on to repetitive thoughts and keep ourselves stuck. But when we let go of any misunderstandings we may have, this gives rise to new thinking and new ideas. It unleashes creativity and helps us have a better experience of life. Now, you may have certain thoughts in your head that you perceive as bad or wrong or even sinful. Perhaps you were brought up thinking good thoughts, as I was, but you may or may not be aware that this is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to control your thinking. Does it make sense to judge yourself for thoughts you have that you cannot control? Also, does it make sense to feel bad or guilty about so-called wrong thoughts if you cannot control these thoughts arising? I'm not saying you should listen to or act on these thoughts. We have thoughts all day that we don't act on because we know that it doesn't make sense to. If you have the thought of punching your neighbor over his blocking your driveway, you probably know that it isn't the best course of action. Any thought you have that you don't act on doesn't cause any harm. Therefore, you don't need to judge yourself for any of your thoughts. You can let them pass. Again, once you see this, it doesn't make any sense to try and change your thinking. Realizing this was a revolutionary for me. It got me back in touch with who I already was, the confident young boy sharing his sweets. It was only misunderstanding that I had picked up along the years that had led me to forget who I was. These misunderstandings led to insecurities, doubt, judgment, and fears. These started to fall away as my misunderstandings fell away. As a child, I did not label or judge my thinking, so did not try and change it. I'm guessing that when you were a small child, the same was true for you. In this book, I hope to help you bring your own misunderstandings to light and expose them for what they really are, false. In doing so, you will start to experience your true self more easily and enjoy the feeling of well-being that is always present, even when it might not feel like it is. Wow, a lot in this chapter. It's really interesting, isn't it? This whole issue of not needing to change your thinking, because so much of the people helping kind of coaching, therapy kind of industries is very much based around changing your thinking, having better thinking, better thoughts, more positive. And yet, as Kush points to, when we were young, we never gave thought a second thought. So somehow we've become conditioned to paying a lot of attention to our thoughts, to our thinking, like it's the most important thing. And I think one of the byproducts I've seen of sharing this misunderstanding over the last 10 years or so is seeing that I don't really need to think about my thinking. That's probably been one of the biggest shifts for me. I got very, very involved in the content of my thinking, and whether it was good thinking, bad thinking, how it could create more helpful thinking. And it's just become more obvious that actually, when I'm in flow, I never think about my thinking at all. It wouldn't dawn on me to think about my thoughts. Now, you might be thinking, that's okay for you. You've been doing this for 10 years or whatever. But the great thing about insight is that insight doesn't care about time. It's not bothered whether you've been studying for 10 minutes, excuse me, or 10 years or 20 years. It doesn't care about that. If you see that you don't need to think about your thinking at any point, I know it's just going to have massive value for you. See you on the next chapter.